An infinite array of events can happen in a dynamic story world. This makes it difficult to categorize the way a story can change from state to state. Action verbs can cue a reader to simulate literally anything. The sun exploded. Oh no. Ro won $1 million. That's fantastic. Good for Ro, that lucky so-and-so. A massive storm rode up on Athena's port bow. Better turn right, guys. Really, I mean anything. And it's not just infinity in the real-world sense that astronomers try to impress us with when they talk about how big the actual universe is. Our fictional universe is much bigger and much cooler because it can have anything the real universe has in it, and more. We've got dragons and robots, hell, even dragon bots. Tell me that idea wouldn't get Ro $1 million more imaginary dollars. Or better yet, gods versus monsters versus dragon bots. It's a veritable cornucopia of ideas for the next summer blockbuster. You get the point. When we talk plot, literally anything can happen. So how do we even begin to think about something so vast as that in a useful way? We'll get to ways we can think of events that make for interesting stories shortly. First, let's take some time to consider how different actions and events can change your story world, because if we look closely, we'll find important distinctions that can produce major differences in the type of story you're trying to tell. We might think of these distinctions as tools for corralling the infinite into manageable chunks. And I'm going to discuss these distinctions as possible ways a story world can change state. Instantaneous versus gradual changes. Well, that sounds easy enough, Ro. Is all this stuff going to be so obvious? Some will, sure. And other concepts will seem very obscure. But it's worth talking about obvious distinctions sometimes, because seemingly obvious distinctions often yield drastically different results. Let's look at a few ways we can think about these distinctions that might help your writing. Boom! Car blows up on a street corner. There are 10 people nearby. That's an instantaneous change that has irrevocably altered your story world in a dynamic way. The woman closest to the blast was killed instantly. Maybe she's not your protagonist, or maybe she is. A significant instantaneous event can really alter how you choose to tell a story. Maybe you start with the blast and go back to the events leading up to the blast. Or maybe the blast hasn't gone off yet and your protagonist, that lady closest to the blast, is the technician from the bomb squad who's been running around the city making all kinds of changes to the story world to try and keep that bomb from going off. A deadline like that can offer your reader a high sensation of suspense if the reader knows it's coming. Or that kind of instantaneous change, if it's not presented to the reader in advance, can surprise the reader, keeping them very curious as to what happened and what's going on in the aftermath. On the other hand, the Carlyle family is rushing to deal with a terrible situation of their own. The Stratford River is overflowing its banks and rising fast, and they're in the floodplain. Oh no. And they have to get out of the house before everything gets washed away. Do they have time to go back inside for the family photos? Great Aunt Josephine's paintings? What about Grampy Dean? He's sleeping in the back room. If we play around with these distinctions, we can see that these different types of changes will make for a different type of situation. One where the suspense is going to have a gradual build-up to a definite climax, and another where the tension is constant, but maybe not so high as the moment the timer on the bomb gets to 5 seconds. Bounded versus unbounded changes. Both of the above distinctions deal with changes we can draw a fairly clear boundary for. The story world before and after the bomb blast, and the story world before and after the house gets washed away. What if the change in your story world has no border in time and space? Take puberty, for example. There's a story for you. Some of the great novels of all time are concerned with the theme coming of age. The Germans even have a ridiculous word for that, Bildungsroman, if you are interested. And also, are there any German words that aren't ridiculous? Fluppergleiter. The thing about a Bildungsroman is that it's all but impossible to pull a moment out of the story where, aha, Jane Eyre is now a woman. And what an amazing woman! But how is it interesting if there's no one bounded event to suddenly and irrevocably change Jane's story world? What is it that makes a coming-of-age story work? In the case of Jane Eyre, it's the long succession of smaller changes in the story world, some gradual, some instantaneous, some with boundaries, some without. and they all add up to a rich masterpiece about a girl growing into a woman, and I'm pretty sure puberty's in there somewhere. Happenings. M. Night Shyamalan films aside, happenings are a useful distinction to know about. You may have noticed a commonality in the examples I gave above. I left out the axe-wielding maniacs, cheating husbands, and drunk driving aunts. All the examples above are happenings. They're changes in the story world where time, unexpected events, and acts of nature impose changes on the characters in the story world. Happenings just happen. Things like tornadoes, earthquakes, wars, terrorist attacks, swarms of killer bees, or yes, puberty. These things happen to your characters. It's important to consider when you're writing a story that involves a happening that a major part of the suspense for your reader simulating the story will be in finding out how your characters react when a crisis beyond their control imposes its will on those characters. A favorite story of mine from my fiction workshop days was about a rock singer finally getting back on stage after a long bout of depression in the aftermath of a terrible breakup. He's halfway through his first song, and who should walk into the center of the crowd? You guessed it, the ex. And the main drama of the story concerned the singer, the ex, and the consequences of their failed relationship. But this story took place in the Southwest, and looming in the background of this story was a massive wildfire, crawling its way down toward the city like an orange, glowing, smoldering menace. The fire added suspense and placed an uncertain time limit on the former couple's attempts to reconcile. It was a beautiful story, and it was a great use of a happening to add both tension and symbolic meaning to a love story that otherwise might have been ordinary. We've now covered floods, explosions, earthquakes, swarms of killer bees, and how could I forget, dragon bots! But if you can believe it, as I alluded to earlier, that's the easy and less interesting half of the equation. We haven't talked about the fun part yet, the people in our story world. That's where things get really interesting. But that's not for this lesson, folks. You're going to have to wait for the next installment. Always give your audience something to look forward to. That's called suspense.